Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. Just okay?
It's Friday, so I'm actually pretty great. Pretty excited.
Me too. I love Fridays. Are Fridays any different as an entrepreneur for you?
We've just started at our office having a half day Friday, and so it gives the team the rest of the day to either do their personal lives or finish up any work so they can enjoy their weekend. So I'm going to take
Amazing.
advantage.
That's great. So you take advantage of that as well as a founder.
Need to lead by example.
Absolutely. That is important. I find that when people are talking about leading by example, often that's a part that gets missed, which is leading by example when it comes to personal well-being and mental health and all that sort of thing. Is that something that comes naturally for you?
No, actually, I have something I did quite poorly, and especially during the pandemic when we started working from home, we instituted mental health days, and we really wanted to have a focus on well-being, and people weren't taking advantage of it. And when our board did some feedback and interviewed staff, they were trying to figure out why, and the reason was I wasn't doing it, and so people didn't want to be the first one to take advantage of it. So it was a lesson that I needed to say it was okay and show it was okay by taking them myself. And now we see a lot of active participation for it. So it was a good lesson to learn.
That is a really, really valuable lesson.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And, it's a great example of why we should have that feedback from staff. And so for my performance review, we actually have the board speak to the staff and get feedback on how I'm doing and things I could improve on. And that was one of the things.
Yeah, I think, how much do you think culture contributes to that as well? And I ask that question because there's lots of different ways to get feedback. But one of the things that, as sort of the interviewer or the board or the founder doing the feedback routines, you want to make sure that the feedback you're getting is accurate, and people need to feel like they can answer feedback surveys or interviews accurately. Because if you're not getting the right information, then you're acting on the wrong feedback, and that just can make matters worse. So how important do you think overall culture is when you're trying to get feedback from your team?
I think the culture is quite important for that, but it's also the space that you're creating. You want to make sure that it's a space that is safe to provide that kind of constructive criticism. We also are quite clear on what the purpose and the intention of it is. So it's not just an area where you can just vent. We're trying to find areas where we can improve. So I'm quite transparent at the beginning of the process that I really value this part of the process, and I'm looking for that feedback and those insights into how I can improve. And without getting that information, I won't be able to grow as a leader. So I express how important it is for me. We have a smaller team, and so it still is a little awkward. We do have processes where we try and keep it anonymous, but when you have 7 people, you can kind of figure out who says what. So I'm sure that we could still do things better to try and have that true, authentic feedback. But ultimately, it's just really expressing and communicating the goal, and then that's when you'll try and get the genuine responses.
And where did your personal leadership style or leadership skills come from? Because as you describe that, you're speaking like a seasoned leader. Is that all natural to you? Have you taken leadership courses?
I wouldn't say it's natural. Growing up, I was quite shy. I had a fear of public speaking and group presentations. I would kind of hide in the back and not fully participate, just out of fear of being mocked, or I guess just feeling out of place or inferior. I started volunteering a lot during my time at university. I spent a lot of time volunteering in hunger-related initiatives. I ran and was a student leader on student government for the CSA at Guelph, which was my first kind of test for leadership. And I think I was a lot of trial by fire, and I learned a lot about working with others and working with boards and volunteers. So it was a lot of, I guess, practice to get to where I am today. I've made a lot of mistakes. I got a few regrets, but I have to take those as learning opportunities and opportunities to grow.
And I don't know if you know this, but we actually have quite a bit in common when it comes to some of our history and some of the sort of volunteer work and stuff that we've done. But you spent a lot of time in Kenya in some of the refugee camps there. I actually spent some time in some of the internally displaced people camps doing projects there in Kenya as well. So we have a little bit in common there, and it's going to be very hard for me not to steer this conversation that way because all of that is so fascinating and interesting. But I do want to talk about it as it relates to the inspiration for your business, which is Lucky Iron Fish. So what can you tell me about how those experiences in Kenya and beyond contributed to your vision for Lucky Iron Fish?
So as I mentioned, I became quite passionate around issues around global hunger and malnutrition in university. I went to a conference in the US called Universities Fighting World Hunger, and it was a network of university chapters that have made commitments to combat hunger both at home and abroad. And it was an American-based organization. And so when I came back to Guelph, I signed the university up to be the first Canadian chapter. And I organized a conference in Guelph where I brought universities from across Canada and the US together and made some pledges to have other Canadian chapters established. And it kind of really helped Universities Fighting World Hunger go global. And at the end of the conference, I asked everyone to make a personal commitment of what they were going to do that year to try and make a difference in hunger and malnutrition. And then at the next conference, you'd be held accountable and you would have to actually talk about what you did in that year to achieve your goal. Mine was to just create more awareness for the situation and to try and get more people engaged. And doing all that work, I was actually asked to do some fundraising work in the Dadaab refugee camp in northern Kenya, which at the time was the largest refugee camp in the world. There were about 750,000 people there, but it was originally built for about 50,000. So it was definitely quite an eye-opening experience. But my focus at the time was really on hunger. And at that time, about 800 million people were going to bed hungry every night, which was awful. But about 3 billion people were going to bed malnourished, and that was about hidden hunger, and that was something that was not really being discussed. And so when I went back to university, I wanted to spend more time learning about the concept of hidden hunger and how we can draw more attention to that. And the largest form of hidden hunger is iron deficiency, which impacts about 2 billion people around the planet. So about a third of the world's population suffers from it, mainly women and children. And iron deficiency rates were actually going up, not down. So this was a problem that was getting worse. There was more and more spending happening to try and solve the problem, but the numbers were going higher. And so I thought that was a problem that needed to be addressed. And that's how I got involved in the issue around iron deficiency.
And I want to ask you about simplicity, because I was having a couple of days ago, I was speaking with Maria Tassi, who is the co-founder of the Social Snippet, and we were talking about social enterprises and sort of socially impact-driven businesses and how often it can be almost more difficult to run a social impact or purpose-driven business. But I feel like you have done an exceptional job keeping all of the complex elements of what you're trying to accomplish as simple as possible. And from the outside looking in, it just feels like that has been an advantage for you. What can you tell me about simplicity and your challenges with it and how you have managed to keep things relatively simple or as simple as possible within Lucky Iron Fish?
Well, I mean, with Lucky Iron Fish, we believe that complex problems don't necessarily need complex solutions. It can be something as simple as putting an iron fish in your pot. So Lucky Iron Fish is a cooking tool that when you boil it for 10 minutes, it will release 6 to 8 milligrams of iron into your meal, and it can be reused every day for up to 5 years. So it's this really simple health innovation that adds natural and healthy iron into your meals. I mentioned that iron deficiency rates were going up when I started Lucky Iron Fish, and that's because I think people were trying to come up with all of these very complicated solutions, and so we're trying to come up with lots of different techniques to try and get iron into different populations, but it wasn't looking at sort of community-based approaches or simple innovation. It was just incredibly overly complicated and overly bureaucratic, and so we were just like, let's take a concept that's been used for hundreds of years, like putting cast iron into food has been done in cultures around the world for generations, and we'll just make it applicable for the community that we're working in. So that's where the original concept came from. And I think we've taken that mindset as we've built the business and grown the business, that I've really tried to focus on just keeping things simple. What are our targets, and how are we going to work our way up to those? I do think that being an impact-driven business, there are added complexities and challenges that you're faced with, but I think that you can weave the solutions into the everyday business, and so it doesn't become this added barrier. It just becomes a part of a way of your day to day.
And do you recall, was there like a particular aha moment that you remember, whether it was you personally or with you and your team or other people, that the concept for what is now Lucky Iron Fish came from or derived from? Because, and the reason I asked that question is you are sort of like a textbook example of a perfect straight line between the problem that you're trying to solve and a simple, innovative solution that solves that problem. And I'm just curious so you kind of make that sound a little bit, we were just thinking about ways to solve this problem. Was it that simple at the time, or was there a series of sort of methods that you used to try to figure out how do we solve that problem, and how early in the Lucky Iron Fish or your founding days, entrepreneurial days, did you land on this simple solution for the problem?
So Christopher Charles led the initial research for what the product is today. He was another student at the University of Guelph who I had met with, and in his work in rural Cambodia had developed the concept of cooking with an iron disc that would fortify your meal with iron. And this was effective. It was adding iron into the water, but women didn't want to cook with it because it looked like a piece of garbage that was picked off the side of the road, and they were saying, this is disgusting.
I can appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that too. But after some discussions within the community and talking to the women in the village, discovered that the symbol of a fish is a symbol of luck in Khmer culture. And so by shaping that disc like a fish, it made more sense to put it in your pot. Women thought it might bring luck to their household. And at the end of the day, it's a fish that goes in your food that makes more sense than an iron block that goes in your food. So I think, for me, the aha moment was when we started seeing the data that was coming in from the clinical work from that. So not only was the iron fish improving iron just as much as iron supplements were, because we had different arms in the clinical trials, and we saw that the results were comparable between the iron supplement group and the fish group. But I think the really big moment where we realized it was going to be a success was the compliance rates. Because iron supplements have some really nasty side effects, and you have to take them every day. The compliance rates were around 30-40%, whereas the compliance rates for the fish group were between 80 to 90%, because it was just a simple
what a
thing.
difference.
So when you have it being just as effective clinically, but more people are using it on a regular basis, you could argue it's actually a more effective solution. And so seeing that data about how effective it was for me was when I thought this has some legs, fish with legs, but this has something that could turn into a real global solution. And then a quick thing that happened was I started the business, and I thought it would be focused just in Cambodia. And I thought maybe this would expand into Southeast Asia, but this was going to be a solution for that region. And so all the resources were focused on growing there. But a part of my PhD work, I had to present at some conferences. And so I was presenting the work in the UK at a conference. And at the end of my session, I had a lineup of people waiting to talk to me after. And they all said, do you have some on you? I would love to use this. I take iron supplements. I don't like them. This sounds perfect. And so that's when I realized, oh, this isn't just a Cambodia solution. This could be a global solution. And so that's where I shifted the business to e-commerce. And now we're in over 80 countries and have helped improve the lives of over 1 million people.
You've come a long way from sitting in the back seat not wanting to speak. I think you answered my question, but I wanted to note it anyway, which was around the name of your business, Lucky Iron Fish. I love the name, but as somebody who does a lot of brand and marketing stuff with other founders and businesses, naming often comes up as, do we like our name? Do we need to change our name? So I think I understand where your name came from. Am I correct that that's where you just sort of told the story about where that came from?
Yeah, so when Chris was involved, the original name was the Happy Fish, and that's the title of his thesis. And I mean, that was, I think, a great name. And the fish itself, like it has a smile on it. It looks quite happy.
Looks like a happy fish. It makes you smile.
Yeah, and then when we're thinking about business, Happy Fish, if you were to hear that, I think we just wanted to expand on it a little bit. And so thinking about the story of the thought that it would bring luck to your household. And then when women started feeling better, and they would say, I don't have headaches anymore, I'm not dizzy, I'm not fainting, it must be the luck of the fish. So I really wanted to pull that luck element into it. So that's where the name Lucky Iron Fish comes from. But as the company is growing, we are looking at some new innovations to provide solutions for iron deficiency. So we're actually right now going through the process of rebranding. And so we'll be soon known as Lucky Iron Life. Lucky Iron Fish will still be a product, but the overall company name will be Lucky Iron Life.
That is awesome. And I mean, we might as well go there because that's sort of where I was going to go in the back half in terms of, with all that you've accomplished up until now, what is the point where you start to look at what you've done and go, what more can we do? And where does the business go from there? Can you tell me about that journey and that decision-making process?
So Lucky Iron Fish is a household fortification tool, which is a complicated way of saying it's a cooking tool that will add iron into your food. So it works at a household level. It's great for groups up to families up to 4. If you have larger families, you either have to cook the fish for longer, so it adds more iron, or use multiple fish. In talking with our NGO partners, we work with a lot of NGOs around the world. Something that has been identified as a need are ways to fortify large volume cooking with iron. So if you think about midday meal programs, for example, for schools, we could look at India. Millions of meals are produced every day for school kids, and they're produced in these commercial kitchens. And so you have these giant industrial cooking pots that are making food, 6 days a week for 20,000, 50,000 kids a day per kitchen. So you can't have a giant bag of fish into that pot. It would just be way too complicated and heavy. So we're actually in clinical trials right now for an iron enriched powder that you could put into that cooking vessel, and then that would fortify the meal on a regular basis. And so we're moving to additional products, but they're not fish related. It's not the shape of a fish, it's a powder. And so we wanted to have a new brand name that reflected the diversity in products that we want to offer.
That's really exciting. How does it feel to be on the Forbes 30 under 30?
It was quite a surprise and an honor, and I got it when I was 30, so I just made the cutoff. I wanted
30
to be
at or under 30?
30 and when I was in high school, I had a very difficult time. I was bullied quite significantly, and I was pushed into a really dark place, and I really struggled. And I I thought that business could be a way for me to like demonstrate my worth. And I actually got into business for the wrong reasons. I thought that if I, had a good salary, made money, I could prove these bullies wrong. And I think ultimately prove to myself that I had value. I had this like fantasy of coming back to a high school reunion with like a nice car and, like look at me, I made it. So when I went to university, that was the motivation. And I actually had a miserable time. I was in finance. I didn't like finance and I was like flunking out. And so I didn't think I was going to make it. I took a chance course that brought me to Botswana. And it was there where I was doing an ecotourism project. And it was a group that was an interdisciplinary study group. So everyone had a different background. And I was the only business student that was there. And like I was saying before, at first I felt like I didn't belong. So I was very quiet and I wasn't really participating. But after I got more comfortable, I started thinking, there's a business solution here. Like I understand where everyone else is coming from, but we have to have the business component for the sustainability of this project. And that's where I started realizing that business can be a force for good. And so when I went back to Guelph, I changed my major and focused more on corporate social responsibility and the concept of business for good. And that's where things really took off, and I started getting on the dean's list and actually doing well, and then ended up doing a PhD. So to get on the Forbes list, thinking I was actually going to flunk out of university was quite a surprise, and I feel really honored and privileged for it.
And I'm gonna project some of my thoughts onto you here, selfishly, because I was actually on the other end of a podcast yesterday, and one of the questions that I was asked was, what are the things that you think make up a good entrepreneur? Like, what are the qualities? What are the traits? What are the skills? And it's interesting because I get this feedback from guests who are on the Be Entrepreneurial show, and often when I talk to them afterwards, they give answers and then they say, "Ooh, I don't know about that answer. Like, do I really like? I told people that, right?" And I had that moment yesterday where when somebody says, "What does it take to be a great entrepreneur?" People are listening, and I feel a responsibility to have accurate answers, which is why I often speak so slowly, because I recognize that people are listening, and I'm always trying to provide value to people and at least guide them in the somewhat right direction wherever I can. And I do feel like that's a responsibility anytime you have a platform. And so the question, or the answer to the question that I gave was, there are three things. It was creativity. What was the other two? Because you hit all three, which is why I wanted to bring it up. It was creativity, intent, so having the right intentions, and experience. So getting out there and just doing stuff that you may or may not feel is directly related to what you're trying to accomplish. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I feel like your journey and the things that you have done, been through, and accomplished really sort of touch those three things very, very nicely, which is the creativity of, coming up with solutions to problems, the intent. And I appreciate that sort of backstory about sort of what your initial intentions were, why those intentions may have been driving you in the wrong direction, and how those intentions changed based on the experiences that you had that may or may not have been related to anything specifically that you were trying to accomplish. Can you just tell me your opinion on those three elements: intent, creativity, and experience? And do you agree that those are required to be a good entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I agree with all of them. And maybe working backwards, I think that your experiences shape you, and it's those experiences that will provide that foundation for leadership. I think you have to be creative. You're faced hourly with different problems, ones that you'll never anticipate.
Minutely.
And I think you have to have that, not just creativity to come up with solutions, but the ability to have like strategic thinking. What's the long-term objective, and how can we work our way out of this problem? But I think the biggest one is intent, or like purpose. It's the why. So why are you doing this? Is because you just want to have your name on a business card, or do you actually want to make a difference and change something? I think the best way to make $1 million is to improve 1 million lives. And so if you're purpose driven and you're in it for the right reasons, then when you're going through those bad days or you're experiencing those minutely problems, you have that motivation to push through. I think if your purpose isn't really that genuine, then it'll be easier for you just to kind of get discouraged and fail.
And is there anything you would add to that list of, what makes up a good entrepreneur, or what do you need? What skills or characteristics do you need to have in order to be a good entrepreneur?
You definitely have to be a little crazy. It is a really difficult job. Lots of people say how lucky I am, and I absolutely appreciate the privilege I have with my job, but it is hard and it's emotional. And there are times when it's just really tough. And so you do have to, be able to power through those challenging moments, and to have whatever it is, whether it's a support system or, coaching or therapy, but something that can help keep you grounded. But at the same time, I think you do need some humility. That especially, like, for me, this was the first business I've created, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And some mistakes were more painful than others. But if you have the ability to learn from those and acknowledge when you're wrong and then learn from them, you will grow and you will improve. And also understand the areas where you're weak. I don't think one entrepreneur can do everything. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. I am not a finance person, as I said earlier. It was the courses I was failing in university. So I'm really good at the
Who needs finance in business?
Yeah, it's a little important. So I'm more of the big picture, strategic thinking, problem solving person. So my the others, the yin to my yang, is someone who can be more in the weeds and more granular on the spreadsheets and the finances, and to help me understand cash flow forecasts. But I wouldn't, if I didn't have the humility to be able to acknowledge that and just think I could do it all on my own, I'd probably be screwed.
And what's how do you feel about personal brand versus your business brand as an entrepreneur? I feel like this is coming up more and more these days, particularly for newer entrepreneurs, because once you sort of have an established business, you more than likely have a team of marketers or a marketing person on your team, and marketing can take a different shape once you have an established brand that can be transferred onto other people to help you with, right? But how do you reckon with, or what's your advice for new entrepreneurs when they're trying to figure out, okay, I'm a human being and I've got this brand idea. What do I do here? Where do I spend my time? How do you manage that as a budding entrepreneur when you're trying to manage both personal and your business, your brand?
It's a great question, and I really appreciate it, because it's something I've been struggling with for a little while now, and that is, I feel that the Lucky Iron Fish brand and story and my brand and story have been so woven together that it's hard to separate them apart. And so the advantage of that is all of the successes of the business, the awards and everything else that's projected and transferred onto me, which absolutely feels great, and I like it. But
you're allowed to like it.
But I take failures personally too, and so if there are big mistakes or misses, or if something goes really wrong, I take that as a personal failure on me, and I worry that it'll be seen as this failure on my part. And so I think my insecurities come back. Should I be here? Am I the right person? Am I worthless or inadequate? And so you do have to try and, I think, separate out the two a little bit, and understand that the business is a business and the entrepreneur is a human. And humans are allowed to have complicated emotions. But for me, I'm still having a difficulty separating the two. So I think advice for someone starting out is appreciate that there are going to be the good moments of having those things connected, but you do, I think, want to create some sort of barrier to keep your personal self just a little disconnected, because if you get too intertwined, it can become quite a complicated journey. That
is excellent advice, particularly in an era where human faces and people are showing up, more and more at the brand level. I want to ask you a question about the consistency of your brand and how you manage that within your team. Because one of the things that I noticed when I was just sort of, doing some high level research on yourself and Lucky Iron Fish is the exceptional consistency of the creative, of the content from platform to platform. It all feels really, really tight. How do you, as you sort of, grow as an entrepreneur and build and grow your team, how do you keep that consistency when the original vision for all of this came from you? How do you put that consistency onto the team and ultimately how your brand gets distributed through the channels to the world?
I think something that is really important that we do is we identify what our brand voice is. I mean, what are our values? Who are we? What do we stand for? And we keep that woven into everything that we do. And obviously, the main focus is around simple solutions for iron deficiency or a health product, but we're based on science, but built on values. So we also are a social enterprise, and we believe in equality and fairness, and we want to see a better world. We want to solve the SDGs, and we believe that business can be a force for good. So with these common elements that are so critical for us as a brand, then as we're building out the marketing plan, or we're doing different marketing activities, we make sure that those are still there. And as the team grows, we just make sure that our values are constantly aligned and communicated. We do, because we have a small team, it's easy, I think, to keep active engagement on the business and where we're going, what we're doing. So we try and have at least 2 retreats a year where we come together and we just talk about kind of what's going well, what we need to improve on, and what are the goals for the upcoming year. And I do find that the brand is often something that's just continuously discussed because we are growing quite rapidly. As we enter new markets, there are different considerations, whether it's like language and translation or different cultural elements to marketing. So we want to make sure that the voice stays the same no matter kind of what platform we're on. So I think that's something that we've just spent a lot of time doing. And as we now move towards Lucky Iron Life, we're keeping that activity and making sure that the name is different, but the voice is still the same.
That's great. And have you started to, are you or your team started to look into or implement artificial intelligence into your business in any way?
So we've looked at what tools are available around web optimization, digital conversion strategies, like SEO, and looking at different things there. But and we've also looked at are there applications for AI for clinical trials that we're doing? Could we have smaller sample sizes if you can use different AI tools? That's something we have an arm's length approach to our research because there's the inherent conflict of interest. So it's something that we've talked to our researchers about, but whether they make the decision or not to use it, that's up to them, and we don't have that influence. So when we looked at what tools are available for the e-com side of the business, it's something we're reviewing, but right now, we still like the human element of asking those questions around the importance of nutrition. Why aren't people getting enough iron? What can we do differently? So, right now we're still focused on more human interaction, but it's something we pay attention to.
And how do you manage, I'm going to use the word anxiety because I'm going to assume that there is a level of anxiety that comes with keeping an arm's length away from the R&D elements. Am I correct to assume that there's some anxiety there?
There definitely is. Not I believe in the product, and so I know it works. My anxiety is, are you doing the research correctly? Because there are ways that you could things could screw up, and I think a problem problem I worry about is we could have 9 great clinical trials, but if there's one that has a negative result, everyone will focus on that and say, see, it doesn't work. They'll ignore the 9. And so
you see this all the time, right? That's not a new phenomenon. Yeah, where you've got, you see the one article that makes the headlines is the not good one, and you're going, what about the 25 good ones? So I understand that. But yeah, so tell me more about that.
So I guess my goal is for every trial just to be, I want it to be done perfectly, so we can have the optimal results. And we did have one trial where it did not work, and it didn't work because the population didn't have iron deficiency like we thought they did. They had thalassemia. It's a hemoglobinopathy. The iron fortification of the food with the iron fish you wouldn't think it would work. The iron supplements weren't working either. So when that trial didn't work, we just made sure we communicated the why, and we were really vocal about it. We didn't want to hide it and just not talk about the trial and say, oh, that never happened. It was no, it did happen and it didn't work, and here's why. But also here's why the other ones did work. So it's just to make sure you have a communication strategy around that.
And what do you, as your team grows and continues to grow, what is there something specifically that you look for in your team members in that hiring process above and beyond anything else?
I mean, the team is the best asset I think that a business has, and I am so lucky and privileged to work with the group of people that I get to work with every single day, who are just so dedicated to the company's mission that even on those really hard days or when things are just awful, they're still committed and they come in with a smile on their face. And we have able to overcome a lot of daunting challenges. I'm trying to think about, how I found that in the hiring process. And I think a part of it is just luck. I think a part of it is the brand attracts people who really want to see it succeed, and they believe in the product, they believe in the mission. And so they're going to go that extra mile to see it succeed. I mean, how do you kind of screen for that or find that? It's a little bit of just gut feeling and intuition. Yeah, but I'm so lucky with the team that we've had, and I don't know what I did to deserve them, but it's great.
I think you interviewed them and hired them. It's probably what you did to deserve them. So no, but as a former people leader, I appreciate that. I still lead people, but I mean former in my former life in telecom and big corporate world, people leader. I appreciate just that gut instinct, right? It's often hard to communicate or articulate, but often, obviously you're looking for a set of skills, but when those people kind of sit in front of you, you just get this feeling that is often just really hard to articulate, right? Do you find that that makes it harder for you or easier for you when you're going, I don't really know what it is here, but you're hired?
Well, I mean, something about the way that the company grew is it was a slow growth, a slow burn, and so we had one position, then like 2, and then 3. But I really believe in elevating the assets you have before bringing in someone new. So as we created more and more senior roles, it was my intent to have the existing team members elevate up and kind of grow their capacities and their leadership potential, because they're already familiar with the company, they're already on board with the mission, and they're doing a fantastic job. So I think that by creating a senior staff of people who have just been there from the early days, it helps that culture kind of stay at the top versus bringing in new talent where you don't know if it's going to mesh in the right way. So I think that strategy has really worked. As we now grow, we're now looking at some larger staff needs with new products. So we are going to have to bring in new people, and so it'll be interesting just to see what type of talent we attract and how we make sure that the stress we put on the importance of culture. I think it's important that the hiring process involves multiple people from the team. I want to get their perspectives as well. Sometimes my gut can be wrong, so it's good to hear other people's opinions. But yeah, I think we're going to go through an interesting time right now, and so I hope that things just kind of the same level of success is seen as we get new staff.
No, that's great. Those are great insights. And what how do you, what's your ratio of working from home? How much do you personally work from home relative versus not from home?
So we had an office pre-pandemic, and so we came in 5 days a week, and it was good. We all came in together. I used to have an office in Guelph when I lived there, and then I moved to Toronto, and we started hiring in Toronto. So we had a co-sharing space, and I think we liked it a lot. And then because we're just such a good team, we liked each other's company. And so we would have just lunch together and talk about our days. And it was just this nice sense of community. And then obviously with the pandemic, it just shifted to virtual. And we kept virtual as lockdowns and things were lifted, because there was still some anxiety around COVID, and obviously it was a cost savings. And as a time when we're looking at growth, any money that we can save that we can put into growing the business. But something we are realizing now is everyone's getting their job done, but it's quite siloed. And when we do come together, we have a staff meeting once a month that's in person, and we find them to be a lot more productive. They go overtime usually because there's more conversation than if we do them virtually. So I'm looking now at some sort of hybrid model. Just want to make sure it's done properly, because we tried having space that was just available if you wanted to use it. And people would come in and they would do a meeting together here or there, but it wasn't that same sense of community. We need to have everyone together. So I think if we're going to do a hybrid model, it's going to be, a couple of days a week or a month that we're just all doing things together. And maybe we'll have a focus more on staff meetings those days, and your independent work can be done, at your own pace. But it's something I think we need to do because we lost that sense of community when we went virtual.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and it makes me think of sort of another element to the whole work from home thing today versus in COVID. And in your business and your leadership and your culture, I think is very much an example of this, where when everybody shifted to home without a choice, really, I believed at the time that a lot of the productivity gains and a lot of the benefits that people were talking about were stemming from the pent up culture or the pent up benefit that people had from working in person and sort of having the culture and the camaraderie and the community that your team had when you shifted from home. And I think what we're now starting to see a few years on is, two things. Number one, the people who sort of had that community built up that really sort of took them into an effective and a productive work from home era, that community is in many cases starting to falter a little bit, which speaks to the importance of in-person human contact, face-to-face collaboration within a team, and also with new team members. So there's a lot of organizations now that are seeing new team members hired who weren't there when that original pent up camaraderie and community was able to benefit the work from home transition. Can you give me your thoughts on that and sort of that difference today versus where you're going?
Yeah, I think that that's true. And then when you have people working from home, it's just easier to make your own timetable. You know what you have to get done. But if you want to take, go for a walk for lunch, listen to a podcast, and then come back and work a little later into the night, you can do that because you're just stuck in your apartment. And there aren't a lot of just different distractions or things kind of keeping you from what you have to do. But I think that what happened is people became very focused on their core deliverables. And so it was, I'm getting my job done and I'm doing it at the pace I want to do it at. It means maybe going for coffee at this time and working a little later at that time, but my job's getting done. And that's okay. But what's being sacrificed is the the innovation and looking at different ways to solve problems together, improve inefficiencies. What can we be doing different to grow? And so I just want to make sure that we're not so focused on our individual objectives that we're not forgetting that there's still always room to improve and to grow and to be even bigger and better. And I think that when you're working together, you come across those and you kind of encourage each other, or you work together to do that. But when you're by yourself, it just becomes an afterthought. So that's why I think our in-person staff meetings are so active, because if someone says a problem they're having, we come together and we try and solve it, versus I'll just sitting here, I'll just figure it out, or we'll do it later, after I do the dishes or whatever. And so I think that's where that connectiveness is important.
Oh, that's good. That's excellent insight. And it sounds like you're being very purposeful and using the experiences that you and your team have experienced both personally and professionally to guide what that hybrid environments looks like moving forward, which I'm sure will make a huge difference, because as long as it makes sense, that's generally when people go, yeah, that makes sense. We agree. So it sounds like that fair process is really working for you, which is great. As we get to the tail end here, what advice would you give, generally speaking, to entrepreneurs who are just starting out today?
I think that for any entrepreneur starting out today, it's such a difficult job. It's so rewarding. And there are going to be lots of moments where you'll just feel so accomplished and happy and successful. But it does take a lot of work to get there. And it's just to keep, your head up. I mentioned before that you really have to be focused on your purpose. So why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And it should be around the deliverable. Like, what are you trying to achieve? I think that if the reason it's just a little superficial, then you'll struggle with that motivation during those difficult times. So never forget the purpose, never forget the why. You might have started out with that really important purpose, but then got a little distracted or pulled away and focused on some other things. So always keep aligned with why you're doing it.
And what about entrepreneurs who are at or around the stage that you're at now, where they've had some successes, they've grown a really solid brand, really solid business, and they're now at that stage where it's like, okay, what comes next? What advice do you have for people who are in that transitionary or next phase of business period?
I guess it's looking at the need. And so what other needs can you solve? So with and what expertise do you have? So with Lucky Iron Fish, a question we often got was, will you look at other nutritional deficiencies? And I absolutely appreciate the question. And we thought about it, but we were experts in iron deficiency, and we have spent 10 years with a really solid solution for iron deficiency, doing clinical trials around the world around iron deficiency. It's a complicated issue. There's new understandings of it every day. So why would we then start to think about a different nutritional challenge when this is so massive and there's still so much more work to be done? So we wanted to, instead of diversifying outside of that, really double down on the problem we were trying to solve around iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia, and become experts in that. So then we started looking at what other needs are out there that we could solve. So we have a home cooking tool. We have the fish. Great. Started talking to our partners, and they were saying, well, we're cooking these massive meals. We have to figure out a way to add iron into that. So we came up with the powder. So that's how we thought about diversification and growth. It was really just, what skill sets do we have? What are we experts in? And what need exists out there that we can find a solution for?
Amazing. And my last question is a fun one. You were on Dragon's Den.
Yeah, I was.
How was that? Can you just walk me through your experience there? What made you want to apply to it to begin with? And what was it like being on Dragon's Den?
So Dragon's Den was a really remarkable experience, and one I highly recommend to anyone who is ready to go on and has a business that's ready to go into the den. I mean, I loved the show. Just as someone who has loved entrepreneurship since I was young, always watched it, and so had a dream of being on it. I will say that when I sometimes in the early days when I watched the show, you see some of the deals and you don't really understand them. So you think, well, that makes sense. And then I actually did some investment in Lucky Iron Fish and raised investment capital and understood deal structures and valuations and how things worked. And then I started watching the show and thinking, well, that deal is not very good, and I don't like that. I wouldn't take that deal. So I was actually a little hesitant to go on because I didn't want to kind of get stuck into giving away, a third of the company. When if I just went the traditional like VC route, it wouldn't be that way.
And something tells me you didn't want to be the guy going, "I'm looking for $500,000 for 2%."
Exactly.
Because those don't go well.
So I spoke to someone who went on the Dragon's Den, and they said, some of those deals are good, and some of them, like, nothing's binding, and there's due diligence after, and if you don't like the deal, you don't have to actually take it. So it's just a good opportunity to go on. And so I thought, okay, that makes sense. So I decided to go on the show. Was really nervous. I watched tons of episodes, and I would pause after each question and I would answer the question for my own business, like how I would have answered that question. And you'll notice when you watch 100 episodes that they ask a lot of the same questions around like your growth.
That might be framed a little bit differently, but they're looking for the same stuff.
Yeah. And so it's like, if as long as you can answer those 5 questions, you're going to be okay. My biggest fear was I didn't want to be like a meme. I didn't want to have fall or say something stupid or just embarrass myself and be on humiliated on TikTok for the rest of my life. So I was, I think, more just focused on that. And there was actually a moment. So we went on and we made iron lemonade to give to the dragons. And so I went to carry the tray over, and I thought, like, if I trip and fall right now and spill lemonade,
this is the moment. This is the meme moment.
Yeah, this is it. So I was like shaking as I brought the lemonade over. But it was a great pitch. Obviously, they edited it down a little bit to make it fit for time. But a lot of good Q&A, good discussion. And the offer I pitched, they actually accepted. And so I didn't have to take an unrealistic offer. I wasn't laughed at either. And so it all worked out.
Amazing. Well, listen, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time. I know you're super, super busy and you got a lot going on. So I can't thank you enough for coming on Be Entrepreneurial. It's great to meet you because you're similar to some of the other guests that I've had where we've just never really communicated or never met. And I'm finding that actually is yielding some really great conversations, knowing nothing about each other other than what we can find online going in. So I appreciate your understanding with that part of it as well. But yeah, thanks a million for coming on. I really appreciate it. Where can people find Lucky Iron Fish?
So the best way to find us would be at Lucky Iron Fish on all the major social medias or luckyironfish.com.
Love it. Soon to be Lucky Iron.
Soon to be Lucky Iron Life, but Life. Either we'll go to our website right now. So Lucky Iron Life or Lucky Iron Fish, we'll got you.
Amazing. Well, enjoy the rest of the day, and we will chat again soon, I'm sure.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciated the conversation.
Cheers.